Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Be Well, where we interview a variety of specialists in the areas of mental health, community advocates, and experts. I'm Monique Tui, your host, and this is an initiative from the Centre for Muslim Wellbeing. This interview is conducted on Wurundjeri land. Let me start by paying my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Eudoaimonia. You don't know how badly you want it, and it's likely you're wondering what it even is. Eudaimonia is a Greek word often translated to mean happiness, intellectual and moral virtues, and the good life. Now, it's not so often that clients come into my clinic with a very clear goal of cultivating the good life. Rather, many clients expect that by coming to see me as a psychologist, I may well provide them relief from an array of negative emotions and experiences and healing from some sort of psychopathology or traumatic past. Well, what you focus on expands. So let's say I sit with my client for an hour and we do a deep dive into their respective diagnosis or trauma. What do you think we're going to find more of? Probably more of the same types of emotions connected to the diagnosis or trauma. But let's say I turn my attention in the session to my client's strengths, their personal and culturally influenced values, their resources, their support system, their capacities, their talents and skills, and that we turn these towards the development of happiness, inner peace, contentment, and experiencing the good life. Well, in terms of a framework, we'd be using positive psychology. In 1998, Martin Seligman formally introduced positive psychology to the American Psychological Society. Now, Abraham Maslow coined the term in 1950, so it took a long time to actually come into the formal parts of the practice of psychology. The shift towards the investigation of optimal human functioning was really to counter a very strong narrative and dominance of just focusing purely on human psychopathology and to establish the science of human flourishing. Now, 1998, coincidentally, was also the first year that I started working as a school counsellor and provisional psychologist. I was the first school counsellor working at Minaret College and Islamic College in Melbourne. Now, the school had no resources at all to work with students. I was given essentially an empty room with a desk and 2 chairs and a massive opportunity to make a difference in the wellbeing of the school community. But Qadar Allah, one of the first resources that I ever came across was to work with children and teenagers, was actually a product called Strength Cards for Kids by Innovative Resources. And believe it or not, I still actually have this set of cards. I lean so heavily on the work that's informed by strength-based perspectives that I found it absolutely fundamental to getting kids and teenagers and even adults that I work with now to talk about their strengths. And it's the quickest way, in my opinion, to establish a safe space, build rapport and engagement in the session, and literally have people walking out with a smile and a much deeper sense of who they are. Now, this is a very different approach to just asking people to talk about their problem or problems. In this episode, we're going to be talking about positive psychology, positive psychotherapy, and the importance of harnessing our strengths in times of adversity. My guest today is Dr. Tayyab Rashid, who's a senior lecturer at the Centre for Wellbeing Science, the University of Melbourne. And Dr. Rashid is also a faculty associate with the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard University and the VIA Institute on Character. He's also an author and co-author of numerous books and publications, including seminal work in strength-based resilience and positive psychotherapy. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Rashid. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to hear from you today.
Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts on this subject. And what a beautiful sort of not only my bio that's far less significant, but the sort of a lovely way of capturing the history of positive psychology from 1998 till today. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Actually, I didn't even actually realize until I did a little bit of research, that it was sort of, came into the profession more formally in 1998. And I'm like, that year actually means a lot to me. And I knew that I had used strength-based perspectives for a very long part of my career. I actually just didn't realize it was all of my career, like since day dot, it was the first thing that I really jumped on. And are still as passionate about this area as I was then, and excited. So I'm very excited to hear from you today. Before we start, I always like to get a sense of what motivates people to come into our profession. So can you tell me, what did your parents say when you told them that you wanted to come into our area and be a psychologist?
Malik, I'm youngest of five, and I grew up in Pakistan, Lahore, Pakistan. When I finished my bachelor's, it was my parents were being the youngest. They were in the latter years of their life, and they were very easygoing. But which were my older brothers, which often happens in Muslim societies, is the older sibling have a lot of sway. And they wanted, my eldest brother wanted me to join civil services, which is considered quite prestigious in Pakistan. And in order to join civil services, the best route would be to do a master's in English literature. So your command over your English is very well. So
Wow.
you become like a post-colonial British master, and you can speak and write well. And I was fortunate enough to go attend a government college in those days. Again, a wonderful institution of a colonial legacy. And I was fortunate to get admission both in English literature and psychology. So it was a wonderful question that you asked me. And I decided to go into psychology. And I informed my older brother, and he was absolutely not happy. And one of the comments, he said, I'm going to join master's MSc in psychology. And he said, but you're not a girl.
Wow.
I literally, there was a pause that we went, it was a pause there. And I didn't, there's lots of reverence. He's an absolutely wonderful human being. I owe so much to him. But again, he's a product of a socialization because psychology was associated as a feminine subject. Most students who were pursuing the subject those days were females. To this day, even in West, there's a heavy skew of females. But at the same time, I was fascinated by human mind and also by human history. Before psychology and literature, my first academic love, Monique, was history.
Mm.
And I was fascinated how the intrigues have been happening over the different periods, especially I thought if you don't understand European history since Napoleon, you can't make much sense of the world. But from a larger canvas of life, I needed to understand what motivates human beings to act, whatever they do, from Holocaust to the atrocities that has been perpetrated, and they are unfortunately to this day are happening.
Yeah.
So both the individual going into collective understanding, that was my ambition. And to this day, he was later on, I'll tell you later on what was what his current opinion is about my selection. But I can tell you for our listeners that even if I'm given this choice, again, I will, in a heartbeat, I will select psychology because it has not disappointed me as a subject, as an area of understanding, but it has also opened many vistas of understanding myself and my place in the world. And how it has benefited my family is that after my parents died about 23 years ago, I had just started my doctoral studies in clinical psych. There was some rifts in the family, and since then I have been able to sort of the kind of a peace broker. And my oldest brother, who said who make that comment, now attributes this sort of brokering process to my psychological knowledge.
Alhamdulillah for the psychologist in the family, right?
We all need to have one, or there is already one.
Wouldn't the world be a better place if everyone had a psychologist in their family? That's my opinion. Can you tell me, psychology is an incredibly broad discipline. There are many, many different schools of thought that you could have gone into. What drew yourself into the world of strength-based resilience and positive psychology? And if you can tell us a little bit about what they are.
Yes. So I actually opted, when I finished my sort of a general master's, MSc in Pakistan, I wanted to badly pursue clinical psych because I was fascinated by the Freudian psychology, the taking a deeper dive into human unconscious and explain everything through the lens of unfulfilled sexual desires or aggressive desires, which is fascinating, seductively fascinating, Monique. And I was on my route to where my second year of practicum was. I applied for my clinical externship, not internship, at New York Institute of New York Psychoanalytical Institute, which is very hard to get in. And they went several interviews, and I was accepted. I was elated. And just a couple of months before, because you apply months ahead to go to your following year, a couple of months before my externship was to begin, they informed me that, unfortunately, the person who is going to supervise me won't be able to supervise me because of some medical reasons, and they asked me to defer my placement for following year, and if I could find another one. So I was left with no option. So I went to Rutgers, which is because my school was in New Jersey, is another university where I did my internship. But during that period, something fascinating happened. That was around the year when as you sort of milestone years, 1998. So for me, this was 2001, around year 2000, yes. My director had left a copy of American Psychologist, January 2000, special issue on positive psychology. And I was already grieving because my parents had recently passed. And my second grief was I was not going to go into my dream placement in New York Psychoanalytical Institute. So down, I read the issue in a one weekend, cover to cover. And that was, to me, that was almost like worked as a antidepressant. Yeah. It lifted me out of this depression, and I realized that for me, if I really want to do something in psychology, is not by looking at the human deficits, but looking at what makes us human being. In Islamic doctrine, we say we are created as the best human being. Best species, Ashraf al-Makhlukat, the best of species. So for me, it was consistent and consonant with that why don't we look for the best resources rather than digging into this very murky, as I said, seductively interesting and enticing to explore unconscious sexual and aggressive motivation. But this, for my readers, if you take a deeper look, that is creation of one psychoanalyst who had very few participants in a Viennese aristocratic society. Very, as I said, wonderful in terms of intellectual sort of exploration, but very weak scientific background. So then the story goes on, and I did. The more I went into exploring what makes us human beings in terms of our assets, the more efficacy I had about change process, because ultimately psychology is about change.
Yeah, that's, and I would also say lacking cross-cultural applicability to some of Freud's teachings. Even himself being a migrant, never actually delved into anything cross-cultural, which is just fascinating, the complete omission of who he was as an individual. Anyway, fascinating. I like to describe it as, or demonstrate it like this. I think that I often say sometimes we come into, adulthood and we're a bit holy, and this is like a deficit approach. You've got that thing going on for you and you've got that thing going on for you and you're pretty holy. But the strength-based approach is much more like this.
Oh, lovely.
It's just this protective layer that has this, has the ability for amplification and growth. And even if I could get that inside that, as in, yeah, absolutely. No one comes into adulthood unscathed, or without problem. But it's this idea of implementing and working with someone to achieve that, which is like expansion of who you are fundamentally. Can you describe some of the context that you've applied? I know you've got a lot of clinical work behind you as well, but can you apply some of the context that you've used strength-based interventions and, and how were they effective?
So I'll summarize 2 or 3 projects. One was I started with teaching, and because my dissertation was upon me, and I had to finish it, and I wanted to do an area of positive psychology, and I also has always been fascinated by movies, power of movies, power of stories. So I requested my chair, and then he was very open, fortunately. And in 2002, I designed one of the very first courses in positive psychology, undergraduate level. And for each class, my students have to watch a film. And these were the days, Monique, when there were no DVDs or streaming services. So they have to go to library and get a VHS. But some DVDs were available, and I would drag a big TV and VCR in every class, and I would select some clips of the movies, even time them. And that was a fascinating experience for me and for my students. There were no exams. They had to watch the film and write a personal reaction paper. So I thought that opened them lots of vistas of growth. The stories that they told me in those reflection papers were amazing. Stories of growth, stories of sometimes trauma, stories of a loss, but followed by growth, followed by a new awakening, awareness. So that was, I think, so I would say in terms of contextualizing approach, education is still as a good bet, but make education as engaging as it is. To this day, there is never any presentation or teaching that I don't use movies or stories. I'm a very big fan of data, quantitative data. I use it to not to supplement, but because it's also very important to understand large samples and their patterns, but to contextualize the data. Stories, selective stories are very important. So that's one. Secondly, fast forward, Monique, in 2000, when I was doing my pre and postdoc internship at University of Pennsylvania, I had the pleasure of working with Martin Seligman under his supervision. And Marty one day said, he has a heavy voice, mine is not. Tayyab, wouldn't it be wonderful if you put all these interventions in a therapy? Because I was doing my clinical work, my PhD is in clinical. And I'm very intimidated by sometimes by Marty. Somehow overnight, I cobbled some interventions, we were getting some initial validation together. And over the next couple of weeks, thought through how they would come together, in what sequence. And this was the birth of what is known as positive psychotherapy. We did a couple of randomized studies. The first one I did under his supervision at Penn, we randomly assigned young adults to individual as well as group settings. And the alternative was they were getting treatment as usual. One group was also getting treatment as usual plus medication, and PPT, positive psychotherapy, both individually and group-wise did much better in remitting symptoms of depression. Since then, Monique, there have been about at least 20 randomized studies published without my involvement, who have found promising findings all over the world. And to your point, lots of them are not in non-Western countries. The third one that I will very briefly say, I've been very much interested in being a clinical psychologist. There is no human being who's listening to us or elsewhere who have not experienced some sort of a pain, loss, or trauma. It's just an inevitable part of our existence. So how we deal with that trauma through the positive psychology gave me additional, for a lack of better word, arsenal, additional tools to deal with the trauma without minimizing, without curtailing pain, dismissing the impact of pain. I wanted to explore if growth is also possible along with dealing. And I think that work is continuing, and that was the most meaningful work, in my view, of integrating both the negative and positive. Even just today, I was working with a mom who had very, very difficult circumstances. Their child has a severe developmental challenge, and the way and many other challenges, many other challenges, and the way they dealt, the power of their story was so amazing. And I said, I'm amazed at your resilience, how you're able to put everything together and sit here. And there was many other people, because it was a interdisciplinary meeting that we were hosting, that we were in supporting the child. So it was wonderful to see that despite that trauma, how people cope. And these are not, Monique, the people who are, shaking the earth-shaking events. These are everyday coping, everyday resilience that can teach us so much.
And inspire us as well.
Inspire, exactly.
Yeah, when people are sitting opposite us and sitting often in a fairly high degree of pain and discomfort, to sit with that, how they're sitting with that and still holding their worlds together and still getting out of bed every day potentially and functioning and that type of thing. Once you look for people's capacities, they don't even sometimes realize that they have them. And I guess this also comes to naming and labeling. Pain is such an attention seeker, isn't it? It's such an attention grabber, pain, so if you get a pain in the side, you're like, where did you come from? And now it's almost hard to focus without, focus on what you're doing because you've got this pain in your side. Emotional pain is very similar. It's such an attention seeker. And so, but what sits alongside it at all times are strengths and capacities and our ability to cope with that as well. But that's often hidden and people don't label it, and at times don't even think that they have it, Well, on this labeling, can you share one of your own strengths? It's a question that I ask all of my clients and people that I've worked with. What are your strengths? It's a perceivably simple question, isn't it?
Yes. And I, of course, being in the field, I have taken the surveys several times. And I think where my strength comes from my response to my brother, that I'm opting for psychology, and that strength, I think that was the strength that provided me that answer. That strength is social intelligence, that I am able to understand, I would say, as much as I can. I won't say it's a stellar or at a very high degree. the what is going on with people, and how I can make them feel comfortable, and despite pain, despite all the challenges, how to still keep them motivated, keep the flicker of hope not extinguish. So I think that comes from social intelligence. It also comes with it gets blended with the kindness. I think usually I described as a kind person. The third one is, I think, which is a kind from this interpersonal cluster, is the opposite one, is love of learning. I love to learn, and just for past 2 days, this is my home office. I have been fascinated because I have to clean lots of stuff, and I've been looking at lots of articles and papers, and I said, oh my goodness, it's so difficult for me to throw away the hard copies of papers. And rather than throwing, I'm keeping them back in the stash. That these are some of these papers I've read, but I feel there's more for me to learn. So I think my demise would be the day I lose motivation to learn.
I hear you. I can relate to that. You're a maven at heart, the lover of learning. It's actually, when I've worked with lots of people in the realm of strengths, that simple question of what are your strengths or characteristics is actually incredibly difficult to answer. We don't go to school to answer that question. When we often focus, when we're at school, we get taught to really focus on our academic strengths. So people, when they answer it, they think and answer it in terms of skills, not characteristics. And often say, skills, lots of people have skills, but who you are will take you everywhere as long as you can, articulate who that is. But we often don't have a strength vocabulary. And universally, I think there's this idea that we should minimize our strengths and certainly not say them out loud for fear of loving ourselves too much or the lack of humility. And in that vein, people often keep their strengths on the low, even to themselves. So when I say, can you tell me their strengths, people are often at a loss and can't even ever give me usually more than 2 strengths. But there are tools out there to help identify our strengths. Can you talk about the amazing VIA tool and any other strength-based tools that you're aware of, but that one in particular? And what does it do? Where can we get it?
I think in nearly 25 years of positive psychology, classification of strengths and virtues, which is values in action, on which the classification of strength is stands on, VIA. VIA is the crowning jewel in positive psychology. It's why? Because we have so far 5 iterations of our Holy Bible. No disrespect to Bible. When I say Bible, that means DSM-5.
I could show people that too while you're mentioning that. Just okay, if we go, because speaking of the Bible, so if you go, hey, this is the little Bible, and it's a little one. I haven't got the big one in front of me, the one that most psychologists rely on to diagnose people, but I prefer this one, this really big one. The strengths and virtues, character strengths and virtues. I way prefer this as a Bible, to talk to people about who are you.
Exactly. So VIA is, Monique, what you just showed is based on this classification, which was published in 2005. My dissertation is one of the first dissertations on this classification. The course that I just discussed had actually all the strengths, which my students have to watch movies, were VIA strengths. So we use that classification. We do pre and post test for strengths there. How I use it, I think I literally, if you give me 10 hours, I can speak on 10 hours without break, because my heart is filled And every time I will recall a story, my spirit will get uplifted. How amazing the VIA has given this label of naming a strength, but I think why I don't just name it. Clients can take the survey free. So far, more than 30 million people around the world has taken the survey. As we speak, every 10 seconds, someone somewhere in the world is taking the survey. And close to 1,000 studies, but I think its high number is high, but safely 1,000 studies have been published in peer review journals on VIA. And so let me give you 2 quick examples how I use it, how it helps my work. I was working with a young person, an immigrant, and severe social anxiety. Couple of sessions, they would end the session before their assigned time, because sitting with me and the session was intimidating for them in the beginning. Couple of sessions into some breathings, some centering helped us to sort of calming down. And then I said, let me tell you something about, and I told them a story about which exhibited my strengths. And I said, everyone has a story. There must be a story you would like to tell. Everyone wants to share something. Everyone wants other people to know something about them. No response. Next session, they came and they said, well, you said about a story, I have one. Without looking at me, they took the paper and they literally kept the paper like this and read the story word by word. When I was and the story goes like this. So I was in grade 10, this person, a male, tall, well-built. In high school, I loved basketball, but I was too shy, and I was good at it, and I was too shy to go to put myself up. Although I was selected in the team, but I was always kind of a backbencher, so always sat in the back. So this was high school, last year for high school, and final game of the regular season. And we were losing by 3 points when a key player got injured, and there were no other choice but coach to say, you have to come on the court. I stepped on the court very reluctantly, quote unquote, the word I remember from this story. The moment I stepped in the court, I felt there were 1,000 eyes piercing on me. And in the entire season, I played for 3 minutes. I scored 3 points, and those 3 points took my team to next round. After the story, we discussed. It was amazing. There was a pause. Sometimes the stories are so powerful that they overpower the room. So the therapy was overpowered by the story. They're not words, very minimal verbal exchange. But then later on, I think that session or following session, we discussed that story in terms of strengths. And the strength that we came is courage. And that courage that this young man exhibited, and say, how can you use the same courage to overcome your challenges? So that I think, and that's the second one is a very brief one. That again, I was running a group, and this young person, again, someone from cross-cultural background, we all introduced ourselves through a story which exhibited our strengths, and she was the last one, and very shy, very reluctant. And this was a group with severe mental health issues. Everyone was looking at her, what's your story? And she looked at me. You want to hear my story? When I was this happened. 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 And everything, Monique and our listeners are smart enough, everything you can fill in the blank, everything was disaster, trauma, challenges.
Yeah.
I was, oh my God, I should have really not insisted and said, let's pass and let's finish the group. I am realizing that I made a faux pas. The person that I was trying to find words. The person who had just gone before her turned towards her and said, and their story was very uplifting, how they overcame an automobile accident. And they turned towards her. But I see you everywhere, every weekend. Why are you here? So if life is so terrible and you have no hope, every week you turn up here, and she looked at him, took a pause, and said, "This is my only hope."
Mm.
And what she really meant later on, I asked that if I don't take care of all the issues that I have now, when will I?
And
So
digging deeper to that, right?
digging deeper. So hope, first story is courage, second is hope. Though both stories are coming from deficits, social anxiety, trauma. But look, and I did not give them a VR, go take a survey. This is the natural organic stories. When you have some little knowledge of strengths, then you can help them to reinterpret their own narratives in terms of strengths, or the strengths they may be needing to change their narrative.
Absolutely. Because often you could be in that session and go, well, it sounds like you have hope. And actually for you to turn up every week, that's a sign of responsibility and you taking some care of yourself. So caring might be, but it's stronger because when you sometimes it's like paying someone a compliment, and we're just so used to through enculturation processes to just bat a compliment back. We don't ever often absorb something that someone nice says, except sometimes if it's just at that right moment, and it might go in and filter and be stored somewhere. But by doing tools and revealing your strengths yourself, you're like, I didn't give them to you. You're saying you have these things. Like you have these things. I don't have to give you anything. So, and then then they're going, okay, now let's bring that up. Let's flourish that from the inside out into your life. Okay, if I was your client and I was experiencing social anxiety, so it's interesting that you've mentioned that was one of the examples I was going to bring, or maybe even depression, what would be some questions that you might ask that might be reflective of positive psychotherapy, or even interventions that you might use with me to help me to cope with that?
Especially for social anxiety, I just want to make sure the person is comfortable, because it's the evaluative fear that someone is evaluating me, and even that could be the therapist. So first of all, you from a strength-based perspective, you want to build the empathy, that how the person is. Now, we therapists are quite comfortable, quite confident. And imagine if that confidence is going to make the other person more vulnerable. Yeah. So just be very, very mindful of the power dynamics, both the expressed and unexpressed in the session. So that's the first one, is use your empathy, use your social intelligence, your kindness to build the rapport. And once they build a rapport, then you want to help them do small experiments. It's a very much a CBT approach, but the only difference between CBT and positive psychology or positive psychotherapy approach is that those experiments are couched, are distilled in strengths. Those are not only to overcome the symptoms. I would say that, Johnny, let's. I want to. Even if bravery is not your strength, because it most likely may not be top strength of someone who is social anxiety. So let's work on this strength. So first, giving them some understanding. Second, as I said, I believe in power of narrative. I show them, even YouTube is streaming services available. So you show them narrative, a real life narrative, a clip from movie, and then say that let's construct a small experiment. And experiment means it can be successful, it cannot be successful. Doesn't so lower the pressure of outcome.
Yeah, I like that.
I want them to go into the process, but process which is nicely cushioned by strengths.
Yeah.
Okay. So because why strengths is important, especially in social anxiety, because the language of strengths will build their self-efficacy. If you tell them that you're going to, the language of deficits, that you have evaluation fear, that your palpitation, the sort of panic-like symptoms are going to happen, you're going to become inarticulate, and you're going to avoid the main basic mechanism in social. One of the primary mechanisms is avoidance.
Yeah,
people are social anxious, they just don't, or they go to people they feel very comfortable. So I want them, so that's one. So I want them to go in to take small, mini social experiments. Even sometimes those social experiments, with some clients have tried, Monique, they don't need to interact. They just go in the social world, complex social world, and explore it. Because then I say, how about you become curious? What the other person, so you exercise your curiosity, exercise your appreciation of beauty, go into the nature, but like a garden where other people are there. So you are using their strengths to build their confidence, and then slowly when they're ready to have them interact. But the technique I use is I ask them to ask strength-based questions, because strength-based questions give them so much confidence rather than, I don't know what to do, what to ask. So if you ask about what are you good at, what do you like, most people feel very comfortable to talk about their passions, their leisures, their hobbies, their resources, or asking them to tell them a story which they learned something, if at any stage when this relationship needs to get deepened. Those strength-based questions can really help to foster. And I also make sure that you're not making too many experiments with too many new people. Few experiments, but going deeper. It's not about lateral, it's going deeper.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. There's so much information in that. I hope people who are listening, whether you're experiencing anything, as in just even if you do a quick Google search on what strength-based questions might look like, I'm sure someone, even yourself, may well have developed a list out there to ask yourself, or if you're working with clients, to ask your clients. In my opinion, and you alluded to this earlier, around some congruence between Islamic, philosophy, I guess, and Islamic ideologies and positive psychology. Me too. I've always thought that. I felt it in my soul that there's congruence between helping ourselves to activate our fitra to be better people on this planet. And I think ideas that are actually prevalent across different faith, groups as well, around the developing of character, that we're not just, we come onto the earth and then we're here to get better, and worship and do good things for the planet through our character. Your book is being translated into over 8 languages, one of them, and it's testament to the openness of people from all over the world to improve their well-being and develop their character. Can you share how positive psychology is being, can get integrated with well-being practices in different parts of the world? Because I know that you're broadly traveled as well.
I am humbled, honestly. I never thought the experiment that I'm doing would make some sense to some people in different parts of the world. So let me tackle the first question. The consonance, the correspondence with our faith. Lots of positive psychology, tons of it, if not all, tons of it has shown and lies in interpersonal domain, our relationships. So if you think about our religious duties, what we call hukuk al-ibad, mean our rights to other people. There is so much emphasis on hukuk al-ibad, to the extent that Quran says that killing one life is killing all humanity.
Yeah, the opposite.
So it's so important in these tumultuous times that we go back to our basics and understand that our deen, our religion teaches. Islam inherently, yes, it's submission to Allah, but that road to that submission to Allah comes from other human beings.
Yeah.
Look, if Allah wanted, if God wanted us to just pray Him, to praise Him, and to pray Him 24/7, there was no dearth of angels. This is their duty, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So why Allah created us and a very complex web and gave us some free will, but also gave us almost a test. And I think ultimately this is an interpersonal test. Our existence is interpersonal.
Yeah.
And your best path to God lies in by being towards the heart and soul with kindness to other people, starting with your parents and with your family. I know relationships are complex and difficult, but you cannot live without them, because if you live without relationship, you're going to be lonely. And positive psychology and public health is now calling loneliness one of the, after COVID, it is the next almost not pandemic, but epidemic. So please understand that. Second one is Islam is, as Monique, you were mentioning, beginning eudaimonic. Islam pursues good life. Good life means balance. Using your strengths in a balanced way.
Yeah.
Islam is not a religion of indulgence. Islam is a religion of both restraint. So eudaimonia, in essence, is striking the balance between pleasure and doing good, feeling good and doing good.
That's right. That's right.
So it's so important that we, and again, it's, I don't find too divergent from many other thoughts, be it Buddhism, be it Stoicism. Because Stoicism teaches us, from Greek philosophy, teaches us to restraint, to be mindful. So I'm not advocating for ultra Stoicism, but think about the restraint that we exercise during Ramadan and the other restraints. So Islam is a religion of self-regulation. And it is becoming more and more difficult in an age of indulgence and abundance, because we have, the onus is on us. There are so many temptations for our senses, for our attention, to distract us. So that's, I think in a nutshell, I would say that my faith is not too far away from positive psychology. The last part, I'm humbled why this approach, positive psychology, has found some appeal in cross-cultural communities, because the most studies of positive psychotherapy has been done in Iran.
Wow.
I've been dumbfounded by what is it, and they've now translated the book as well, the manual as well, and the reason is because they probably, this is just a hunch, they probably find it consistent with the cultural ethos as well as religious teachings, which I just explained. So it's amazing. I don't have any, there's no accurate information. This is just my hunch.
I think it also, serves as the way that we have a relationship with God is through Allah's 99 characteristics. We don't have an image for God. We have a relationship with God based on 99 characteristics. and getting that alignment. I feel like that we feel good when we're doing good, and we feel good when we're activating our core strengths or our signature strengths. It lifts us up, gives us energy to put that goodness not just into the world with other people, but also for ourselves. So 80-20 rule, 80% for other people, to keep 20% for yourself as well, so we're not falling into self-sacrifice or boundary conflicts. But also the environment, the goodness that's required from our character to protect the environment that we're in, and the world that we live on. That's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you. I hope we get another chance to talk again, because as you said, I think we could have 9 or 10 hours worth at least to cover the breadth of what you know, if not more. I'm sure there's a whole course that we might be able to access. We will direct people to your website to have a look and to have a look at your wonderful works and publications, for which are vast and many. And I don't know how you've achieved that, but mashallah. It's quite a breadth of publications, and may God keep you very healthy to keep putting out some goodness into the world. Now, anyone who's ever been to any of my workshops or wellbeing or leadership programs, or even attended as a client in my clinic, knows that they've been always asked to answer that one simple question: what are your strengths? And as I ask this question right now, maybe you put us on pause, or you get a little pad out and you write down what your strengths are, so that you individually benefit from today's session. So again, thank you, Tayyab, for sharing your insights today. And again, this has been another episode of a wonderful episode of Be Well. Look forward to speaking to you soon. Assalamu alaikum.